He's incredibly talented as a designer, and then that coupled with his great skill technically has meant that it's given him a real opportunity to work on some of the best buildings in the country. I really honestly believe that a lot of those buildings wouldn't still be with us without Jeremy.
I don't think there's one piece of work that's Jeremy's finest. I think it was the fact that he had an influence on so many wonderful buildings, especially historic buildings.
In Auckland, he's got the domain covered with the Auckland War Memorial Museum and its winter gardens. He is the conservation architect to the whole of the regenerated Britomart precinct, the Auckland City Art Gallery and the Civic Theatre. And he has had his hand in aiding the University of Auckland in the guardianship of many of its rich collection of heritage places.
Jeremy is incredibly kind. There's not too many architects who would agree to letting someone else come and design on their property. It's really a sign of his kind of generosity and his spirit of adventure, which I think permeates everything that he does.
He's very articulate and persuasive. He does this through his inarguable reasoning and also his wit.
You never knew where he was coming from with some of his very witty remarks, and they just broke you up sometimes. It was good fun to be with.
When Jeremy sent his apologies for tonight's ceremony and asked Peter to accept on his behalf, he included this message, which is my privilege to read. Peter has been an instrumental part of my professional career, both supportive and challenging, and we built our practice up together. He managed many of our most important and successful projects, including a number for this university. He's been a good friend, and although he has appalling taste in music, I forgive him. So, Jeremy was one of 4 distinguished alumni in 2020 who had their award ceremony unceremoniously cancelled due to an inconsiderate virus. Fortunately, though, he had already made a video acknowledging the award, which was to play at last year's event, so while he may not be with us tonight, we can still hear from him. Take it away.
Chancellor, Vice-Chancellor, fellow alumni, friends, colleagues, long-suffering clients, distinguished guests. No one is more surprised than me to be in this situation. I'm really suffering from a severe attack of imposter syndrome, but I'm not arguing. I'm a Gore boy. I'm one of a family of 7, what my dad cheerfully referred to as his large wife and family. And from early on, I would draw. I taught myself calligraphy. I copied the labels from Johnny Walker bottles, and people told me I had all the qualifications to be an architect, and I believed them. So I went to high school knowing that that was what I wanted to do, encouraged by my architect uncle Arthur and by the knowledge of my architect grandfather Louis. I left school with a Ministry of Works Study Award, which was a real bonus because my dad died the day I started university. But this gave me also my first experience of working in the real world of architecture in Dunedin. I proceeded then to Auckland, the only school of architecture in the country, combining study with duties as a housemaster at Dilworth School. I was probably the only student who consistently turned up to lectures wearing a tie. But I was determined to return to Dunedin. I wasn't going to get trapped by some Auckland bird and never be able to leave. But in the end, I met and married Anne, a Gisborne bird, and I'm still in Auckland and very happy to be here. Some of you may well have heard of Anne. So I graduated knowing my mission was to design wonderful buildings and save the world through modern architecture. However, I made the mistake of returning to the school to do a master's degree. I had become preoccupied with the lovely villa that Anne and I bought nearly 50 years ago, and I felt the need to understand its origins and how such houses came to populate our towns and suburbs. And this was eventually published, and I was immediately pigeonholed as an old house architect. It was a mixed blessing because it brought me lots of work on old buildings, but not much in the way of modern design. So I made a virtue of necessity, and this has become a way of practice for me as one of what was then a very small group of such practitioners. I was fascinated with both the philosophical questions raised by the preservation of the architectural heritage and the brute mechanics of actually doing this. I've been especially interested in how new buildings can be fitted gracefully into our established urban landscapes, and equally what actually constitutes our built heritage, and the importance of retaining not only the best, but equally representative examples of the ordinary, because these too are an important part of the legacy. I became preoccupied with the language of conservation, with finding an appropriate language to persuade and bully others into a point of view. And this led eventually and inevitably to the need to proselytise and generally make a nuisance of myself. And ultimately I ended up in court, the Environment Court. Not a particularly happy place for a conservation architect. But here I am in my happy place, surrounded in my work by an accomplished team and 2 partners who give me enough rope to hang myself. They also generously indulge me in my second career, shared with Anne, another form of conservation in a valley north of Gisborne. Here, we're encouraging nature to take its course in an effort to recover the intrinsic beauty and integrity of a wonderful landscape, and to repopulate this with the indigenous plants, insects and birds, and to heal the wounds of decades of neglect. In an unexpected way, our careers have converged here, and as I said earlier, it has really become a second career. The honour that the university does me acknowledges my activities of the past 45 years as an architect, and it is an honour. I thank the university, and I'm proud to share this occasion with 3 other remarkable alumni, but I'm still surprised. Thank you.
So you're going to shuffle